Hello everyone! With the Warcraft movie, we received 2 novels and a graphic novel to set the universe up and expand on it. In this video, I want to give you a general rundown as to what story they created, my opinion about what they created, and at the end of the video, I'll go into more spoiler territory by talking about some of the scenes that were cut out of the movie itself and some speculation. I'll give you a heads up before we dive into the spoilers. Let's first talk about the books in general. The graphic novel, Bonds of Brotherhood, is to set up the history behind King Lane, Anduin Lothar, and the Guardian Medivh. The art style of the book is pretty damn cool. Don't let the cover fool you. What's inside looks a whole lot better, but the story itself is pretty short. It does give some nice details for the Guardian, Lothar's family situation, and Lane's mindset to being the king of Stormwind. The 2 novels are both written by Christie Gul'dan, and as some of you might know, when it comes to the Warcraft novels, Gul'dan is definitely my favorite. This means that I devoured them in a couple of hours, and the writing style is what I would expect. The first one is called Durotan, which sets up the history of Durotan. I know, big shocker surprise, the Frostwolf clan and their entry into the Horde. How did they live on the planet of Draenor? What road led to them joining the Horde? And it ends just about before the movie kicks off. I personally thought that the story was a little bit repetitive, but on the plus side, they do give a whole lot more character development to people like Gaia, Durotan's mother, which previously didn't have that much story to go with. Now, the official movie novelization, named Warcraft, actually surprised me, since when I ordered it, I expected it to be some sort of script or something like that, but it's a genuine novel, which was a very nice surprise. This book pretty much tells the story as you see it on the big screen, including the deleted scenes, and of course a book has way more time to explain what someone is thinking, whereas in the movie, that's supposed to be shown with acting. It's packed with story. It reminded me a lot of Rise of the Horde, which is a great thing, right? Because Rise of the Horde is definitely up there when it comes to the novels. And I love the additional information that the movie failed to show. When it comes to my opinion about these 3 things, like all of them add something nice to the whole Warcraft movie universe, with the Warcraft novelization definitely being my favorite. Durotan is very nice to go into the mind of Durotan and the Frostwolf clan. You definitely get a better feeling of a chieftain trying to hold a clan together. Whereas the graphic novel, it looks beautiful, but like I said, the story is not that big. It has some nice details here and there, but overall, if you are wondering like which one of the 3 to buy, definitely recommend the novelization. Then on the second spot would be the Durotan novel, and then finally the graphic novel. One final thing that I do want to mention before I go into the spoiler section is that the story told in the movie and these 3 books, it's doing its own universe, its own adaptation. A lot of people have asked, how come this happened in the movie, but this is what I see in-game? That's because the movie is doing its own thing and it's not strictly following the original lore, nor does it change the main universe lore. See it as an alternate reality. If you play through Warlords of Draenor, see it as alternate Draenor. It is based on the Warcraft universe, but it's doing its own thing. Just want to put it in there for those that have been asking about it. With that, let's go a little bit deeper into the lore. Let's talk about the spoilers. As always, if you don't want any spoilers for these novels or the Warcraft movie, then let me just say thank you very much for watching so far, and please turn off the video right now. So what is it that I want to dive into when it comes to additional information for the Warcraft movie? There are a lot of changes here and there, right? You got Doomhammer being a Frostwolf to Khadgar leaving the Kirin Tor right at the start. I think it's best to just start at the beginning, starting with Durotan. Durotan and the Frostwolf clan joined the Horde because their world was dying, because of Gul'dan and the use of Fel. Gul'dan offered them a spot within his Horde. They refused, something happened, Gul'dan offered it again, they refused again, something bad happened, until Durotan saw no other way to go than to go with the Horde and find a new world. They had no real choice in that regard. It was either staying on Draenor and die, or go with Gul'dan, which they knew was evil, and try to conquer a new world to live in. That's the reason why I found this novel to be a little bit repetitive. The way that they push Durotan and the Frostwolf clan, it's a bit of a repeat. That said, the character development is definitely a plus. The Frostwolf clan was done rather nicely, and you really dive into the mind of Durotan as he's thrown into the role of war chief, and he tries to do what is best for his people, even if it means teaming up with someone that they realize that they know is bad. Then we have the Bonds of Brotherhood storyline. It talks about Lothar, Lane and Medivh while they were much younger. It established Lothar's connection with his kid, it explains situation with his sister, and it places a sense of duty for his people upon Lane's shoulders. Most of all, it also explains how Medivh became corrupted, how he got in touch with the Fel, but I want to dive further into that at the end of the video, since there's still room for speculation and maybe one of you could fill me in. The official movie novelization follows the story told in the movie with a few additional scenes, and I think it's easier and more interested to talk about the scenes that I found. The opening scene in the book has young Varian within Stormwind Keep playing around with toy soldiers as Khadgar walks in and talks to him. The man moved beside him. In the faint lamplight, his hair did not look quite so grey, nor was the scar that ran from his chin to eye quite as ugly as it appeared in the daylight. This scene takes place after the movie, and Khadgar then goes on to talk about the war, explaining that not all of the orcs were all vile and evil, orcs like Durotan. Varian is still described as a boy, Stormwind still stands, so I wonder why they decided to describe Khadgar as being grey and having a scar on his face. There was no life-draining scene in the movie or the books, so I wonder what their intention was. There's a scene as Durotan and the Frostwolf clan, they arrive at the Horde campsite and they interact with some of the orcs there, like Blackhand and even Gromar's Hellscream. A lot of you pointed out that you did spot him in the movie, but he didn't have any lines in the novel, and I assume in the extra scenes he does. There's a scene with more interaction between Lothar and his son, and especially the novel does a brilliant job at describing Lothar's mindset. He struggles with the death of his wife, who died giving birth to their son, and the novel had a lot more time developing that relationship. They also ride past a statue of Medivh, which was built for him at the end of Bonds of Brotherhood, which was a nice touch because I noticed it in the movie and I was like, hey, why is there a statue of Medivh in Stormwind? But apparently there was a scene explaining that. Another scene has Durotan examine the Frostwolf camp after he's been raided by Gul'dan's people, and Durotan can see that his clan has fallen. He remembers their names, he promised them to make it right, and in his battle with Gul'dan, those names once again come back to him. Now, not all of the orcs that joined them through the Dark Portal are mentioned dead in this scene. Someone like Drekvar, for example, could have survived. So if they do decide to ever go with a follow-up on this movie, and they want to have the Frostwolf clan there for when Thrall grows up, they definitely could. There's definitely room for that. Then the end of the novel, it has a closing scene with young Varian on the throne room and Khadgar telling him that they should go back to his mother, since he's probably wondering where her son is. Varian then walks back to the board to pick up a miniature king from the war map, and then it talks about how the Alliance marched towards a fortress. All bone and iron, steely and ugly angles that served a purpose and reflected those who built it. This was an orc fortress, and the one known as Gul'dan oversaw everything. Monstrous, green, he leaned on his staff. Below him was a sea of brown and green skins, of weapons, of simmering anger and bloodlust. Beside the orc, who was her leader, if no longer her master, stood Gerona half-orcan. Although she wore armor and carried a spear, she alone among the horde did not shout for blood, nor spit toward her enemy, and her eyes were not on the approaching army. Instead, she looked away, her gaze distant, her thoughts not on the present moment, but the past and a future that might one day be. I believe that this is definitely one of those scenes that were cut out. If you compare it to the initial scene with Varian and Khadgar in the throne room, it seems like that matches, right? The starting scene, the end scene with the army of the Alliance riding up to this fortress. It definitely makes sense, and I really hope that the movie will do well enough to actually get the bonus credit, to actually get like a director's cut. Right, this then brings us to the mysterious Guardian Medivh and his story arc. My question to you is, how much of the original lore did they use for this Medivh? As in, was he corrupted by the Titan spirit Sargeras? I actually had a minor discussion about this in the comment section, but I still believe that they've cut out that part of the story arc to make it easier to understand and just have him turn into a random demon. The reason for that, why I believe this, is that his whole story arc with his father Nilis Aran, his mother Aegwynn, it's never mentioned. The Warcraft novelization starts him off as a boy with the Kirin Tor, the Chamber of Air, where he has to prove himself worthy of becoming the Guardian. There's a small test, and he has to stick his arm into magical fire to brand him with the Eye of the Kirin Tor, right, that you see with Khadgar, and then they decide to make him the Guardian. Bonds of Brotherhood has him show up after finishing his training to become a Guardian, and he's about to move in to the Tower of Karazhan. In this story, we read about Medivh as he discovers that the Fel is being used by a troll warlord, which they attack and eventually bring down. This pisses off the rest of the trolls, leading into an all-out attack on Stormwind City, but the encounter with the Fel makes the Guardian curious about this dark type of magic. He mentions that he only ever saw power like that once before. The Guardian then moves into Karazhan and he starts teaching himself about the Fel. He finds out that a previous Guardian, called Quellan, was the foremost authority on this power, and Quellan was unusual in that he involved the tower's caretaker, Morus, in every aspect of his work. Medivh convinced Murus to hand over Quillen's journal, thinking that he was different, he would be able to handle this corrupted power. It starts small at first, but when the troll army hits Stormwind hard and the Guardian's arcane magic fails, he sees no other option than to utilize the Fel and wipe the trolls out. The citizens cheer for their guardian, they build him that statue that I mentioned earlier, and even Medivh himself believes that he has the Fel under control. But Fel is a corrupting power, and one taste often leads down a dark path. We then get a little gap in the storyline, which is not explained in detail. The Guardian vanishes for a few years, they even acknowledge that in the movie, and I believe that in that time he found his way to Draenor. When Khadgar enters the box with Elodie inside, Elodie is the name for the first Guardian, which I've been calling Elodie for years, she tells him that the reason why the Guardian was vulnerable, what had tempted him to betray his charge, was loneliness. Like all Guardians before him, Medivh was charged by the Kirin Tor to protect this world, alone. His heart, she said gravely, was true. So devoted to his charge was he that he took it upon himself to find and master all forms of magic. It was during this search, in the depths of the void, that he came upon something insidious, a power of terrifying potency. The Fel. Despite his best intentions, it consumed him, twisting his very soul. It turned his love for Azeroth into an insatiable need to spread the Fel. So why do I think that he went to Draenor with all of this? Well, first of all, because they fully acknowledge Gul'dan working for Medivh. So instead of kill Jaden, corrupting the orcs first, it seems like Medivh did it all by himself and they cut out the kill Jaden part. Next to that is something that the movie hinted at. Some of you were smart enough to pick it up, but I was oblivious after watching the movie. But in this universe, Gerona is Medivh's daughter, which means that his loneliness, that whole conversation about traveling to the ends of the world to find the one you love, teleporting her to Lothar, that final thing that he says when he, at the end, all of that was because of that father-daughter connection. Her mother was burned for giving birth to her, and Gul'dan brought her with him to please Medivh, so that's another reason as to why Medivh on Draenor is a thing. For those wondering what happened originally with Gerona, originally she was set to be half orc, half human, but in the comics they then changed that and we found out that she was actually half orc and half Draenei, with Marad being her uncle and Medan being the child of Gerona and Medivh. That's quite a change in storyline there, but interesting nonetheless. So Medivh, he became corrupted by the Fel, he had this urge inside of him to spread it around, he found his victim in the form of Gul'dan, and who knows what other planets he infected. Gul'dan then uses the Fel and he corrupts the planet of Draenor. This kills the planet, they're invited into Azeroth by Medivh, more Fel is used until Khadgar steps up and he purges the Fel out of the Guardian. The threat of Gul'dan and the Horde still waits for the Alliance in a future movie. It might be done in a sequel, but for now, I'm just hoping that we'll see the director's cut and we'll actually witness some of these scenes. So my question still stands, do you think that Sargeras was still used for Medivh? Again, I personally think not, considering all this information, and the only thing that I could see supporting it is that the demon that eventually comes out of Medivh, it looks similar to Sargeras. I have to admit. You might say, well, a Murloc looks like a Murloc, even though it's never said to be a Murloc, but I don't think it's that easy when it comes to Medivh. His whole origin story, from the way that he got his powers, to the way that he was trained, and then the way that he was corrupted has changed. I don't think that they wanted to go with that whole origin story of Sargeras, but maybe I missed something, and you can fill me in. Either way, that's where I'm going to leave this video for today. As always, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Subscribe if you like my videos, leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and until next time guys, see ya!